Hi, good evening again. Hirsch Sar here, reporting from Auckland, New Zealand. And today is Sunday, the 26th of April, 2026. And yeah, geez, I really have to work on these backgrounds, don't I? I have to make a very strong mental note to improve for next time. Okay, fingers crossed on that. But yes, without further ado, in this talk video, which is a really interesting one, and definitely one which we might not get asked at much at all in life, or really at any time, let alone all the time, but certainly one which we all think about, which we all dream about. What would I do if I was the richest person in the world? I'm not going to say the richest man in the world. No, the richest person in the world. Regardless of gender. Hey, there are definitely more than two genders. Take that, Trump. There's probably more genders than I can even count. Yeah, that's definitely for sure. But yes, what would I do if I was the richest man in the world? Just now, did a very quick Google search, and as you would probably expect, remember I'm talking from April 2026, just in case you're watching this video a bit later on. As of today, from what I saw on the Google search, the richest person in the world is, of course, none other than Elon Musk. Yeah, that was definitely a Nazi salute at Trump's inauguration in January 2025. But yeah, that was definitely a Nazi salute, I'll give you that. But anyway, need to stop digressing. Need to stop going off on a tangent. But yes, as of today, 26 April 2026, the richest person in the world is Elon Musk. And from what I saw on Google, his estimated net worth is 817 to 850 billion. Billion with a B, of course, billion US dollars. Jeez, what do you even do with that much of money? So much of money. You can't even, while you know the figure, right? And you know what it means, 800 and say 17 billion US, or if you like, 817,000 million, just very quickly put into perspective, like, a decent house, say, here in Auckland, or decent even townhouse in central Auckland, and say, about 1 million US, then yes, it's a bit like saying 817,000 of those, but even that still doesn't quite put into perspective, does it? You know, that's just off the top of my head. But yes, what would I do if I was the richest person in the world with such a vast empire? Oh my God. Okay, I think my answer is probably a bit different, but a bit unique from what a lot of other people would answer. Of course, what they want to say to that is completely up to them. It's a bit like we're all entitled to our own opinion on everything. And I do believe that we are all entitled to our own opinion on everything. We really are. But yes, but I thought why I just thought of putting this video together was because I really believe that what I would do if I was the richest person in the world is really is unique and hopefully a bit inspirational because I remember actually telling it to some family members and they thought it was inspirational. And while it might come across as even boasting, some people might even call it a tad arrogant. I guess I would admit, but this is honestly, truly what I would do if I had, that much of money. Okay, say you've got 800 billion US, say you are Elon Musk. And of course, from what I know, the vast majority of his wealth is not really in property or commodities such as gold. It's basically shares in the companies that he owns a part of, such as SpaceX, the space venture, the space organization. Then, of course, there is Tesla cars, the electric cars, and then he has a share in X, the social media business, which was formerly Twitter, and I think there's a few other companies he has a share in. So basically, the majority of his wealth is in shares. So I guess what you would do if you were him, and if you wanted to say liquidate that wealth, take it out of the shares, put it in somewhere else, because of course the shares are probably from what I would think are doing pretty well, and they seem to be growing. But of course, shares can be very volatile, certainly more volatile than, for example, property or commodities. Um, but say you did that. Okay, say you've got 800 billion US, or this is what I would do if I was him, or if I had his wealth. If I had 800 billion US, what I would honestly do, okay, and they're in shares. Let's say we need to strategically liquidate that and bring the money out of shares, convert it into cold hard cash. Obviously, selling a big sell-off of shares will without doubt decrease their value. Let's just say, for argument's sake, and being very conservative, that once you liquidated that money and took that wealth and took it all out of the shares and converted it into cash, that it basically became 500 billion US. 500 billion US, down from say 817 or 850. By the time you did all that and the value, maybe some of the shares lost, and of course all the administrative and transactional costs associated with that. If you had 500 billion US, still definitely one of the richest people on the planet, what I would do, and say what you will about this, but really this is what, and I've thought this through. Of course, a little bit I would keep for myself, so I would never have to work again, and I would be financially sound and taken care of for the rest of my life. Paying off my own mortgage, as tiny as and minuscule it would seem compared to that amount of wealth, probably paying off the mortgages of those very close to me, definitely them as well. Close family, close friends, paying off their mortgages too. Okay, once I'd done all that, maybe bought them a few little toys and presents as well. I would move to India, seriously. The fastest growing economy in the world, one of the few economies and countries that are really suffering because obviously today, you look what's happening. You've got the energy crisis in the UK. Europe as a whole is suffering, especially from the lack of oil. And of course, lack of oil and high oil prices is affecting virtually everyone else. The USA, especially when that disgusting orange thing came back into the Oval Office, has been an absolute free fall, not just in wealth, but in pretty much every single way, even including what other people think of them. The USA is falling, Canada's slowing down, Germany slowing down, Australia slowing down, China slowing down for the first time in eons, and unfortunately, my home country, New Zealand, is also not a really free fall, but unfortunately, it is going backwards. Unfortunately, so. But India is one of the few countries that's really continuing to grow. I would take that 500 billion US to India. I would. And what I would do, I would convert it into, rock solid, literally, property investments. I guess that's what I like. That's what I specialize in. And in India, in Bangalore, or now called Bengaluru, it was originally Bengaluru, the British. This is the city in the south, which is the IT hub. You think of South India and kind of in the middle. This is where the city is, the capital of Karnataka, that state of India. Bengaluru, it used to be called. The British changed it to Bangalore. The Indians have now recently changed it back to Bengaluru. I would take it there, and currently in Bengaluru, there's a huge complex of, I think, a few hundred apartments and some commercial spaces called Bhatia City. It's a massive complex. My rough estimate would be to build one of those from scratch, a huge development of hundreds of apartments and tens of commercial spaces, and of course, open areas and common areas and the like, and car parks and all that. My rough estimate to build one of those would be about 5 billion US. So what I would do with that 500 billion US taken from, liquidating the wealth in those companies, the shares, I would build 100 Bhatia cities at about 5 billion a pop, using that 500 billion US. And I'll build 100 of them, of course, mortgage free. That would, oh my God, that would really make the Indian economy shoot up. Think about it. Oh, it's like a drug. It really makes you feel so good. How much you would be doing for the Indian economy, for the people. How much the economy will grow even more. How much unemployment would come down, how much poverty would come down, how much growth there would be. I would do that. How many people you would employ and help in just so many ways. I will build all at once, and I'll build 100 of those complexes. It will probably take about a good 5 to 10 years to do so, all mortgage free, which dramatically reduces the level of their risk. And then once, please imagine, there'll be a rental, not cash cow, there'll be a rental behemoth. Once you have that wealth, basically what I want to do is park that wealth there in rock solid, cold, hard assets that would always appreciate over time, and which are less volatile. So you park that wealth there, and then you've got the rent from literally what will be thousands of individual units, apartments, and commercial spaces. The rent is constantly pouring in. Then what I would do is a little bit like I spoke about in a previous talk video called What All Governments Should Do, based on that old idea by the former Soviet Union Premier Nikita Khrushchev. Nikita Khrushchev, who came in after the horrible Stalin and who was there from, if I remember correctly, 1953 to I think 1965, the Soviet premier. I think after him was Brezhnev, and then there was Yeltsin, and then there was Mikhail Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev, I think, was the last Soviet premier in 1985 to 1991. He tried to hold the Soviet Union together, but of course it collapsed, on Christmas Day, 1991. But Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier who came in after Joseph Stalin, the horrible, evil dictator who slaughtered tens of billions of people, his own people. Nikita Khrushchev had, like I discussed in that previous talk video, saying what we need to do is obviously there should be no maximum in terms of wealth, but we need to create minimum standards. So for those who are poor or very poor or even homeless, or tell them to get back on their feet rather than giving them, say, just a free benefit. We will actually put them in centres where they are given, board, food, basic clothes, but it's very, very basic. It'll be like a soup kitchen or a homeless shelter. You'd be in a bed in a massive room of 100 beds, and it would be very basic meals. The clothes would be, think about not just secondhand, but stuff like the Salvation Army couldn't even sell. That'll put it into perspective, right? That'll give you some idea. It would be very basic, but hey, it beats sleeping in a doorway, it beats being homeless, it beats going hungry, it beats being poverty stricken. And what the idea is that people in those centres, they work for 1 hour a day doing the housework in those centres, the cleaning, the making the beds, the preparing of food, all that. They do about 1 hour of housework every day, but they're there until they're back on their feet, until they find a job or they start a business and the business does well. And then, of course, once they have their own wealth, their own proper income, then they can move away from that centre. The idea is that the centres are there to help you to get back on your feet, but obviously, who would want to live that way forever in such in pretty low level conditions, even if it was free? So what I would do once creating those 100 Bhatia city complexes and having the rental income coming in, I would use that rental income to create a lot of these centres throughout India where people can live in them for free, given very basic food, clothing, shelter, the essentials, and they do 1 hour of housework every day to add to it. But at the same time, it's the motivation for them to get back on their feet, so they don't want to stay there forever. I would do that all across India, and I would honestly bring India's poverty level down to zero, hopefully before my time was up. That's what I would do. I think the last time I looked at it, the population of India is about 1.4 billion people, and unfortunately, there is about I think it's about 300 million people below the poverty level within that. So that might not seem high as a percentage, but obviously it's very high just as a sheer number. The population of my country where I live now is about 5.2 million, population of New Zealand. But in India, you've got approximately, I think, very roughly 300 million below the poverty level. But that's what I would do. I put and make centres all across the country, have them come into the centres, work in them, and take care of them. But at the same time, help them to get back on their own feet without giving them too much and making them so reliant on that free handout. And then helping them to get back on their own feet and therefore out of poverty and into the economy and contributing to the economy and contributing to society and having a purpose and having their own life and being fulfilled and having an income and being able to enjoy all that life has to offer. If I was the richest person in the world, if I had Elon Musk's wealth, that is what I would do, really. And I'd have keep a lot of wealth to myself, having ownership of those 100 complexes, but I would also at the same time take India out of poverty. I would reduce the level of poverty in that country, that incredible nation, all the way down to zero, or at least very close, and hopefully before my time was up. That's what I would do if I was the richest person in the world. Thank you.